All right, well, let's go ahead and do it. Let me just throw up the slide deck. Just could somebody give me a quick yes, I can see the screen. All right, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. There's nothing worse than being halfway through and realizing people aren't looking at what you thought they were looking at. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So this is a webinar that I, in particular, am very excited about because this is one of those things that we get to do where it actually genuinely improves the organization that we're serving. A lot of IT is firewalls and security and things that happen behind the scenes that most people don't see or touch or feel every day, and they don't make anybody's lives any different. However, in this case, this is an opportunity where we're talking about a product that has the real opportunity and potential to have a very positive impact on the organization that we're installing it for. So thank you for being here today. I won't waste any more time. We'll go ahead and jump right in. So before we go too much further, I always like to just do a quick introduction on who Paragus is. We've got a lot of people on the call today who may not be as familiar with us. So just a little bit of a background. The company's been around for about 16 years, and we've been operating under the name Paragus for the last 10 of those years. We made the name change to Paragus when we decided that we wanted to exclusively focus on being the outsourced IT partner for small and medium-sized businesses. So we shut down all the other divisions of the company and went all in on this. And ever since we did that, we have grown like a weed. And one of the things that you should know about Paragus is we are an employee-owned company. And that's a very special thing to us, and it has a lot of impact on the way that we approach the work that we do and how we serve our clients. Our core purpose, as we like to say, is this idea of making IT fun. At the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, or however many point in the day you want to talk about it, our focus is how do we make the technology that we're implementing and managing and supporting for our clients as effortless, as easy, as intuitive as possible. We want technology to empower our clients to be more successful, to be better, to be faster, to be more efficient. And so our focus is always about how do we make it fun? How do we make the IT so effortless, so easy that staff enjoy using it and that it ends up being something that makes it easier for them to do what they're trying to do? At the same time, a huge part of making IT fun for us is making sure that when you're calling for support, reaching out, getting help, that we're doing everything possible to make that a positive and enjoy and a fun experience. The next thing I'm going to show you is just a quick kind of breakdown of how Paragus is structured. As we've thought about it over the years and really decided kind of what are the major aspects of what it is that we do for our clients, we decided to break the company into 4 distinct departments. This is one of the most unique things about Paragus because we don't try to have one person trying to do too many things where things slip through the cracks and things get lost, or that one person leaves or moves on or gets a different job and suddenly it's incredibly disruptive. Rather, we have 4 different departments that handle the different aspects of a client's technology. An on-demand support department that's the help desk that's there to handle what's ever happening right now. Our security and compliance experts who worry about everything behind the scenes, monitoring, management, antivirus, all of those types of things. Our strategy folks that are working with our clients to think about which technology should I be using, when should I be investing, what's the right approach, and that's a lot of what we'll be talking about today as we get more into this topic around SharePoint. And their newest division that we launched in October of 2020 was our automation division. And that's where we help clients use technology to be more efficient and save time. And then the foundation of our 4 pillars is our products department. Whenever we do a client project, we assign a full-time product manager who can really help to make sure that product stays on track and on budget. All right, so enough about that. Let's get into why we are here today. For probably a not too insignificant number of people on this call, the files that your business depends on, the things that you have spent decades in some cases building and collecting and creating, and the data and tools that you use to communicate and collaborate every day with your employees and your customers probably lives on something that looks not too dissimilar from this. Maybe you keep yours a little bit cleaner, but a lot of businesses are still storing their data, their vital, critical, important data on physical hardware that is physically located in one of their offices. Now, 5 years ago, that would have been completely normal. There would have been nothing strange about that. That would have been totally expected. However, a lot has changed. Technology has really moved us forward in a way that this is no longer considered kind of normal. This is now in the bucket of legacy as we move beyond this into what's next. And a great analogy for that was the migration from Microsoft Exchange to Office 365. 5 years ago, it would have been perfectly normal for you to have a mail server in your office. Might have been the Exchange server, might have even been something else, but the idea that you had your email actually being delivered to your physical office and that staff were checking the email using devices that were talking to the server in your office would not have been that abnormal. Today, if you were still doing that, you would be in the vast minority. Most of the world in the last 5 years has migrated their email to the cloud. Many of them have chosen Microsoft 365, some have chosen Google, and there's other products as well. But many, many businesses have made the decision that it just doesn't make sense to have my email in my building. So why did they do that? What was the thought process behind those decisions to abandon those servers? Well, there's 4 pretty obvious ones. First, it's more reliable. Your data is spread across thousands of servers, spread across the entire world, many different continents, many different countries. Very, very reliable. It would take a lot for something to completely go down. Second, it's more secure. No matter how much you invest in the security of your office, it's never going to compare to what Microsoft or Google are spending on security. Third, it's accessible anywhere, anytime. No more I have to be in the office, or if the power's out or internet's out, then I can't check my email. You lose all of that dependency of kind of any physicality. Your data is where you want it to be anytime with your email server. And then finally, it's more cost effective. Both Microsoft and Google price their products so aggressively that when you compare the cost of subscribing to their email platform versus owning a server, replacing every 4 to 5 years, doing maintenance and monitoring and updates and patches and buying hardware, all of that cost is not cheaper than just subscribing to the mail service. And that's not always true of every cloud solution, but it is true of email. So when you factor those 4 things, it's not surprising that in the last 5 years, almost every single business has gotten rid of their on-prem mail servers and moved to some form of a cloud-based provider like Microsoft 365. So here's the question for today. What if I told you that not only do those 4 benefits, the 4 benefits that make the decision so easy, what if those 4 benefits not only apply to SharePoint, but that there was countless more beyond just those 4 benefits? Would you be interested to learn more? Well, let's start off with my favorite example of why SharePoint makes sense. For those of you who know what this error message is and have encountered it in your life, can you imagine never, ever, ever having to see this error message again? This dreaded message telling you that even though it's 2022, you still live in a world where only one person can have a file open at the same time. This, for me, was probably the #1 reason to move to SharePoint. This was just maddening, especially at certain times of the month when you're working on certain documents and you're sharing them with other people in the company. And it's this game of, hey, Peter, can you close out of the file? Or can you let me know when you're done? I already closed out of it. Jim must have opened it. All that is gone. That alone is a reason to move to SharePoint. However, there's more. What if I told you that forgetting to hit save as could be corrected with 2 clicks of the mouse, 0 panic, and no phone call to IT? We don't have to restore anything with backups. We don't have to make any big deal about it. It's super easy. How is that, you say? It works just like this. Let's say you're in this Word document, you accidentally hit save instead of save as, and you overrode the previous version when what you wanted to do is make a new version. All you have to do is click the version history button right in Microsoft Word. You will see every version of that file, and it saves almost every minute or so. So you're going to have multiple versions. You just choose the minute right before you wanted to make the new copy, hit open version, file, save as, and now you have a separate copy of that document, and you still have the original. Or if you wanted to go back in time completely because you didn't like your changes or you didn't like somebody else's changes, you could go back to that version and just hit the restore button, and it will replace the current version with that version that you have selected. Again, Anyone can do this. You're not an IT administrator. You're not calling tech support. This is happening right within the Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint application that you're using, and it requires basically no training or skill. Still not convinced? What if I told you that you would never have to remember to save a file again? How is that possible, you say? Because of Autosave. When you're using 365 in SharePoint, what's going to happen is just about every document you create, everything you touch, even a brand new file by default is going to save to a location that has Autosave enabled, which means every minute or so, Microsoft is going to save a copy of the file that you're working on, Excel, PowerPoint, Word, whatever the Office application is, so that you don't ever have to remember to hit save. You can just create a file, go about your business, close out of it, and that file is going to be there waiting for you when you need to go back to it. In fact, not only will it be there, but as I mentioned in the previous slide, up to 250 versions of that file will be there. So if this is a document that's been around for a long time that you've opened up and closed and saved and edited, and other people in the organization have edited, and it's had a lot of changes to it, you will have up to 250 versions of this file that if you ever wanted to go back to any one in particular, you can scroll through the list and see exactly who changed the file at what date and time, select that copy, compare the two side by side, restore one, or save one as another copy. The reality is that I could probably give you a list of close to 100 reasons of why getting off your old legacy file server makes sense. However, rather than just spending the next 30 minutes looking at funny memes, which would be fun, let's dig a little bit deeper into the major benefits and mechanics of how this actually works. However, before we can do that, we do have to address the elephant in the room. What is the elephant, you say? SharePoint sucks, right? We've probably all heard that. If you haven't been around long enough. SharePoint has this terrible, awful reputation. And for many, many years, it was very true. SharePoint is a product that has been around since 2001. Started out as a product called SharePoint Portal Server. And it was designed to be like a company's intranet page back when intranets were a thing. From there, Microsoft kept introducing new versions and upgrades, but the GUI was always terrible. The product was notoriously unreliable. It was so complicated and hard to manage, and it was just not user-friendly. Beyond that, it was quirky as hell, and it required a ton of support. For all of those reasons, from 2001 all the way through 2016, SharePoint continued to develop this really bad reputation, up until the point that they launched SharePoint Online. What we're talking about for the rest of today is not the legacy historic SharePoint that sucks, because in many ways that statement is still somewhat true, although it has gotten better. What we're talking about is a product called SharePoint Online. And SharePoint Online is one of the key components of Office 365. It's an essential building block to your 365 foundation if you're looking at how you're going to leverage and utilize 365 in your company. So beyond all the reasons we've already covered, let's dig a little bit deeper into some of the benefits of SharePoint Online and why I feel so confident telling you that this product makes so much sense for your business. So first, it's easy to manage and it's very cost effective. Since SharePoint Online is a web-based platform that's hosted in Microsoft's cloud environment, there's no extra hardware to manage. It's not another server, it's not another VM, it's nothing inside your building or inside your network. You don't own the physical hardware or the equipment that is creating this service. In fact, what you're doing is you're turning the idea of storing and saving and managing and collaborating and sharing data from an infrastructure to a service. You're creating a service that you're consuming, and that service is not one that you're responsible to provide. You're just responsible to consume it, which is the way it should be. In addition to that, that means that your company does not need to invest in any hardware. And in most cases, the SharePoint cost, the kind of licensing cost, is often already being paid for based on your current 365 subscription. So that's one of the things that makes this product just so cost effective. Is many of the times when we're talking to clients or prospective clients about moving to SharePoint and we do an analysis of their current 365 licensing, they're already paying for it. There's no additional cost on a monthly basis. It's already built into the licensing that they already have. All they need to do is migrate and start using it. It's a pretty hard ROI to beat. If there's no cost long term and it's going to replace a significant cost that you're currently incurring, that's going to have a really, really good return on investment. The next is just how multifunctional it is. So what is SharePoint? We talk about it, and it's really 4 major pillars or pieces. First, it's file storage and collaboration. So this is how you and your staff are going to have data, share it, work on it, update it, edit it, archive it, save it. All the things that are related to storing files and sharing and collaboration are a huge piece of SharePoint. Then it does have the capacity to be an internal website for updating company information and announcements. We don't like to use the word intranet anymore because I think that also has a negative kind of connotation from a long time ago. But it's a great internal website. It's one that is not accessible to anybody but your staff. You can have company calendars, photo directories, slideshows, announcements. It's now very easy to almost drag and drop any content you want into your SharePoint page and make it as elaborate or as simple as you'd like. Next, it's a great place to easily share content with outside parties like vendors and customers. So you can take pieces of SharePoint and you can expose them to either the entire world or to just very specific invited guests. So it's a great way, let's say if you're an architecture firm and you want to share design drawings with one of your customers, you can create a page within SharePoint where that can be stored, and only those people that you have invited would have access to that data. You can make one for each of your customers and invite them just to their pages, and it'd be a great place to upload files, even share, collaborate, and comment on documents. It can be a great repository for legal firms that want to be able to put a document somewhere where people can comment and edit on it. It's great for accounting firms that want to be able to share files with customers. There's an endless list of ways that you can leverage SharePoint to better communicate and collaborate with your customers and vendors. And then 4, SharePoint is the basis for the automation platform. So we've done in several different webinars now on how Microsoft automation tools can save your business a tremendous amount of time and money. And in this labor market, it's probably more important than ever. SharePoint is the basis for a lot of that. We use SharePoint to store data, to create what are called SharePoint lists, to access the files that we want to update, to do a lot of the intricacy of those automations. We need to leverage and harness the power of Microsoft SharePoint. The nice thing, or the next thing I should say, is that because SharePoint is online and cloud-based, you can access your files anywhere and on any device. So that means that from my cell phone, I can upload the SharePoint app and see all my files and folders and open them and edit them and collaborate on them and leave comments and do all the cool things that I want to do right from my cell phone, anytime, anywhere. I can also do it from my iPad, from my Microsoft Surface device, from my laptop, from my desktop, from the computer in the business center at the hotel I'm staying at, from my wife's computer. Anywhere that I have access to an internet connection and a browser, I can open up SharePoint and I can have access to all the data within my company. I don't have to log into a VPN. I don't have to be at the office. I can access the information I need anytime, anywhere, and in a way that isn't kludgy or kind of like a second-class experience. It's not different than when I'm in the office. It's the same experience all the time. And so I can just use the data whenever I need to, wherever I need to. Then we get into the advanced security and compliance benefits of SharePoint. So first of all, most of you, I would bet almost all of you, do not have multi-factor authentication protecting your file server today, which means that I can access your files with just a username and a password. Now, maybe I need to be on premise, but maybe I don't. Maybe you have an RDP server or some other way for me to get in that only requires a username and a password for me to get to your files. I talked about earlier, your files are maybe one of the most important pieces of your business. They may go back many, many years. They may contain all kinds of proprietary and confidential information. Your files matter, and it's really important you protect them. When you put them into the SharePoint Online platform, we can protect them with multi-factor authentication. And we can go much further than that. We can have IP address limiting. We can have certain hours of the day. We can filter by what's called geo IP location, meaning you can only access it if you're in certain geographic locations. There's a lot of really cool things we can do to make your data super secure once you host it in the Microsoft SharePoint Online platform. The next is, unlike when you have your data on premise, we have easy accessible logs of exactly which files were accessed by whom and when. So if you have a really critical database that's got very confidential information in it, and you want an alert to go to your phone or an email to go to your inbox, every time somebody opens up that file, just because you'd like to know that they were in there or they touched it. Or maybe your compliance body requires that you log all access to certain data. Easy. SharePoint Online has a button that we can press that creates that log. And then from there, if we want to make alerts, we can easily add in those alerts. We also have the ability to do things like restrict downloads. So if you want people to be able to see data, but not copy it to a local device or email it or do other things with it, we can restrict what people can do with the data beyond just being able to access it. That's not something that we can traditionally do with most on-prem file servers. In addition, we have the ability to remotely wipe data from employees' devices. So in a few minutes, I'm going to show you all the different ways you're accessing this data. Let's say I'm a remote employee, I've got my laptop and my cell phone, and I've got your data, your company's data on all of my devices. I've got email attachments and files I've clicked and added to my desktop and all this data out there. If I'm terminated or I quit or resign and you want that data off of all of my devices, in a traditional on-prem file server, that's very hard to do. In a SharePoint Online environment, it's a very easy thing to do. We can push out a command to get all that data off of all those devices and clean it all out. And then finally, and this is a little bit anti-Paragus, but IT is not needed when you want to change who has access to what. I already told you earlier that you can recover your own data without having to call IT. Now you can also change who has access. It's no longer, hey, we need to add somebody to this security group so they can see the M drive. Now anybody can be listed as kind of an owner of that M drive, and anybody who's an owner of it can go in and add and remove members. It makes it much easier for you guys to self-manage and self-control who has access to what information and to change that on the fly, because sometimes somebody needs access to data just for a little while. Maybe they're working on a project. You want to give them access for a week and then you want to take it away. You can do that on your own very easily. And I'll show you in a little while just what that looks like. Next is this kind of balance between the usability and user experience. So whenever we get people excited about change and they start to say, okay, I like this idea, I like this concept. However, what is it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? So why are you asking? Kind of where's that coming from? Inevitably, it's because my users hate change and I'll never be able to get them to do this. That's a very common sentiment. And unfortunately, it stops a lot of progress and a lot of innovation. The good news is about SharePoint is the way it's designed is it can feel as much or as little like what you're doing now. And there's so many different user experiences that you really can curate the experience that each individual user wants and let them access it the way they want to in a way that feels comfortable. So probably the most traditional way to access files is through something called a map network drive. There's probably plenty of people on this call today whose my computer looks something like this, where they've got the accounting drive or the leadership drive or the marketing drive, and they can click on it and there's files and folders in it. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to go SharePoint Online because we're so used to doing it this way. We're so used to accessing our data this way. I don't think we could adjust. Well, what if I told you you can access SharePoint Online almost the same way? So this is File Explorer on a SharePoint Online environment. And what you can see here is the shared drive. So you've got the finance drive. This is a documents drive. And you click on it and it's the exact same file and folder structure. So right here within Windows Explorer, no different than what you're used to. You can browse your directories, you can save files, open files, edit files, and do it all without having to use any of the new interfaces like Teams or the SharePoint Online app that we'll look at in just a few moments. Other people are going to like using it through the SharePoint app. And so this is kind of what the SharePoint app looks like. This is where you're able to go in and access data through several different portals. The first I'm going to show you is the Teams interface. So if you're already using Microsoft Teams, maybe you're using it as your voice solution, maybe you're using it just for internal communication and chat, maybe you're starting to use it to store some files. Well, if you are, you're actually using SharePoint because Teams itself does not have a file storage component to it. what Teams is it's a skin or a portal that goes on front of Microsoft SharePoint. So if this is my Teams interface and I'm clicking on the Files tab that exists in every single channel in Teams, and there's data here, that data is actually in SharePoint. It doesn't live in Teams. Teams is just a way to access that data. And I can click this button and open it in SharePoint just to see that. And this is kind of the brilliance of what Microsoft did, is they found a way for people to use SharePoint without having to use SharePoint. And so if you really don't like the SharePoint interface, if you don't like that experience, you can use SharePoint and never touch it, never see it, never even know that it exists. You could access all of your data either through the Teams interface or through those map drives that we were talking about earlier. Another way is through this SharePoint app. And this is what you would have like on your tablet or your iOS or iOS or Android device. And this is a SharePoint app that has documents and folders, and you can move things and copy things. There's certain things that you cannot do in the Teams app that you can only do in the SharePoint app. So for example, if you need to upload hundreds of files or you need to copy a bunch of directories, you're going to do that in SharePoint. You're not going to do it in Teams. But if you just want to open a file or save a file or move one file, you can do all that in Teams. You don't need to even go into the SharePoint interface. And then there's the actual SharePoint Online page. This is where the most functionality exists. This is kind of the foundation of the entire SharePoint platform. This is where the data really, truly lives. And so when you're in the SharePoint Online interface, you can kind of get a sense of what I was talking about earlier, where you can drag and drop, and this is a field marketing guide page, and they've got some pictures and some PowerPoints and some Excel spreadsheets. You can see the edits that have been made recently that are highlighted. You can have comments, you can sync data. It's fairly intuitive. It has come a very, very long way from the days of I hate SharePoint. As I've talked about a couple of times now, anytime, anywhere, any device. So what that means is that each of your users can figure out how do they want to access the data. And they don't have to do it even one way. They may access some data a certain way, other data a different way, maybe one way when they're traveling, one way when in the office. They're going to be able to access this data that's all going to live in one place from any of these different entry points. And that makes it just so much more dynamic. Instead of right now, where you probably only have one way, I need to get connected to the office, either by physically being there or using a VPN or remote desktop. Then I got to browse through File Explorer, the files and folders. Now I still have that option, except for now I don't have to be in the office and I don't have to use a VPN. But I also have all these other options available to me that are going to make sense for different applications. And the more you get comfortable with SharePoint and learn more about it, the more you'll kind of intuitively know, okay, that's when I would use my mobile app versus that's when I would use OneDrive versus that's when I would use Teams. And I'll show you that a little bit more in just a few minutes. The next thing I want to show you is, regardless of how you access it, you can all access the same file at the same time. This goes back to a few minutes ago when I was talking about that dreaded error message. Never again. Not only is that error message not going to show up, but I can literally see who's in the document. I can see where in the document they are. There's a setting I can turn on to color code the different changes different people are making, so I can tell what Robin added versus what was there when Robin opened it. I have endless possibilities to be able to understand who is in this document, what changes they're making, and allow all of us to work on it collaboratively together. And especially if we're all working at different times of the day. Maybe I'm coming in, making some notes, and then I've got 5 minutes between meetings. I'm going to log in, leave some notes. It allows us to work kind of when and where we are, instead of having to like get in a room and all work on the document at the same time and try to coordinate all of our calendars. This is also where you can invite people to work on a document. And as I was talking about earlier, you can even have your settings such that you can invite outside people to edit this document. Or let's say, for example, this document lives in leadership folder, and by default, only leadership members have access to it. However, you want Joanne, who's in a different department, not on leadership team, to be able to see just this one document. Without having to call IT, without having to do anything crazy, you could just invite Joanne and give them read access or edit access right here in the app, just by pressing a button, and Joanne will have access to just this document. You can even set that access to expire. So you could say for 90 days, I want Joanne to have access to this document, then I want it to go away. All of that is without involving IT, right on the fly, very easily. The next thing that's really fun, especially in Word documents and Excel files, is the commenting tool. So in the commenting tool, you can just add a new comment, and it creates a comment bar on the left-hand side. You can see who the comment is from. You can mark a comment resolved. You can reply to a comment. You can even assign somebody a task. And if you use the @ symbol to call out their name, they'll receive an email letting them know that somebody just made a comment that referenced their name in the document. And that will kind of clue them in that they need to open up that document and see what the comment was that you left for them. This saves a ton of back and forth email. You're not going to have the same Word document in your inbox 100 times, each with different revisions and edits on it. And so many people still work like that. And once you stop working like that, you'll look back and think that was archaic. Like, how do we ever do that? I think the whole point of this webinar was this idea of like, can you imagine if we still use phone books as our primary way of communicating and looking up information? That's what it's going to feel like to use a legacy file server once you're on SharePoint. It just seems so arcane. So with all that in mind, it's not hard to imagine why this product is growing so quickly. It has become over 145 million users, and that was just as of April of 2021. Microsoft hasn't released their newer stats. But I don't think it's hard to see why. It truly just makes the business a lot more mobile, more scalable, more efficient, and it does it all without any additional cost or complexity. There's not a lot of times in IT when you can say that it's going to be cheaper, faster, and better. This truly is one of those times that I feel pretty confident saying that all three of those statements could be made, and they would be very, very true. So let's take a moment and just take a quick look. And as you start to have questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat. I've left plenty of time at the end, and I'll address any questions that people have. So by all means, please go ahead and post them now, or we can, at the end of it, you can unmute and just ask them live. So there's a couple things I just want to show you about kind of what that experience looks like. So if I was going to access my SharePoint data, oftentimes where I start from is Teams. Teams is kind of the place that I live. I'm in Teams 80% of my day. And so let's just say I'm already in Teams. So anytime I click on files, as I mentioned earlier, I'm now in SharePoint. I'm not literally in SharePoint, but the data I'm accessing is in SharePoint. And there's a lot I can do it here. I can open a document, I can click on it, I can download it, I can delete it, I can check it out so nobody else can edit it if you really truly want to lock a file. I can invite people to it. I can do all the things that we were talking about. But let's say, for example, that I need to do more than I can do here. And I really want to see kind of the back end of this. I want to go into SharePoint. All I have to do is press this button. When I do that, it's going to open up in the SharePoint app online. And so now I see all that same data, but I see it in the SharePoint interface. When I'm in the SharePoint interface, I have a few more menu options that I did not have when I was in the SharePoint app through Teams. I can just do a few more things. The automation tools suddenly become available to me. I can move more documents and data. And this is where I can start to do things like starting to create alerts and build logging and do some of those things. The other button I want to show you is this sync button. You can see it here, and they even added it to Teams now. So in Teams, I can hit the sync button. When I hit the sync button, what it does is it takes whatever directory that I'm in and it puts it into File Explorer. So I mentioned earlier that one of the ways you can access Teams is File Explorer. You don't even need IT to tell you or to set up your File Explorer experience. You can curate and customize what files and folders you want to be able to access in File Explorer. So let's say there's documents that you're constantly uploading and moving and emailing and changing around, and you just want to be able to get to them through the File Explorer experience because it's comfortable and it's easy for you. Anytime you hit that sync button, it's going to put that directory underneath this icon in File Explorer. So I have my Paragus IT directory, and every time I hit sync, it just does that. So I've got our marketing and sales folder because I'm in there all the time making proposals for prospective clients. I have my board of directors documents because I'm constantly saving documents into there and uploading them to other people. All of our prospective clients' information and all of our marketing and sales tools. These are the directories that I use. Other people in the organization will customize their experience for the files and folders that they want to use. The next piece of SharePoint that's important to understand is the OneDrive component. Now, OneDrive is not technically part of SharePoint, but they're so synonymous that we always talk about them at the same time. The way I always describe it is SharePoint is the shared data across your company. It might be company-wide, it might be department, it might be team-specific, it might be client data. But OneDrive is your data. OneDrive is uniquely your data. Nobody can see your OneDrive account. Anything you put into OneDrive is for you. So the first thing that we always do in a OneDrive deployment is we map the person's desktop, My Documents, and Downloads folder to their OneDrive account. That way, and you can see that right here. So this is my OneDrive. If I go to my OneDrive, I can see my desktop documents, I can see my pictures. So anytime I am saving something to my desktop, which inevitably is everybody's favorite place to put very, very important files, but it's not usually backed up. And so if you put data on your desktop, at worst, it's not backed up. At best, it's not accessible on your home computer or when you're traveling or from your wife's cell phone. But once you have OneDrive installed, it is. Anytime I open up OneDrive, either on my computer, or if I go back to the Office experience, I can simply go to office.com. I can click on the OneDrive icon, and I can click on the desktop folder, and this is going to have the same data that would be if I clicked on this desktop icon, or if I actually looked at my desktop. So my desktop, my documents, my pictures, those are now all being synced across all my different devices and available to me from anywhere I want, anytime I want them. Beyond that, I can throw anything else in my OneDrive account that I want. It's where I put my tax data throughout the years. I'm thinking about it. Different notebooks I have for OneDrive, I like to put them in here so I can always access my OneDrive notebooks. Anything else that I'm working on, I can just throw it in here anytime I want. And that way I just know that nobody else can see it. So maybe it's something I'm working on that I'm not ready to share yet. And so I just want to throw it here as kind of like my work in progress folder. And then later when I'm ready to invite other people to it, I may move it out of OneDrive into SharePoint or into Teams, which is also SharePoint, so people can get to it. But it's just my personal little private place to put documents, files, folders, pictures, anything I need that I want available to me at all times. So, quick recap. In-house server just doesn't make sense. Only one person can open a file at a time. Sharing often requires attaching files to emails, which is a disaster. You've got endless copies of the same file, which just leads to endless confusion. It's only accessible when you're in your local network, either through VPN or physically. IT has to be involved every time you want to change permissions, recover a file, pretty much do anything. And it requires expensive equipment that must be replaced and maintained. And it's expensive because it has to be redundant. It's going to be backed up. These are important files. You can't just throw a $100 computer in a corner and put all your critical data on there. Compare to SharePoint. Multiple users can be in the same file at the same time. It's effortless to share files internally and externally, no matter who the person is or what their permissions are. Files are automatically saved in real time, up to 250 versions. You can access anywhere, anytime from any device. You can easily go to your revision history and restore copies. And the ongoing cost is probably already included in your current Microsoft licensing. And if not, it's not very expensive to add it, depending on which plan that you're in. So hopefully we've started to set off some light bulbs and you're realizing, man, this is definitely the future. There's no question. This is where I need to be migrating my file server to, and this is the right way for us to evolve and grow our technology footprint. If that is true, then I have done my job and inspired you to think about how you can make your file server better. But where do you go from here? I've shown you the platform, but how do you get from point A to point B? How do you get all your data from where it lives now to where it needs to be in a way that all your staff are comfortable accessing it? You haven't messed up security, you haven't lost anything or confused anything. Well, of course, that is exactly why we're here. This is one of our favorite products to do for clients, as I was talking about earlier, and it's something that we are happy to help our clients with. The way we want you to think about it is we're your Sherpa. We know the trail, we know what's around the corner, we know what's going to be hard and what's going to be easy, and we're going to guide you through the entire experience so that all you have to do is show up, listen, follow along, and at the end of the day, you're going to reach the summit. How have we tried to make this easy? Well, in the spirit of making IT fun, we really tried to simplify the experience and process of migrating to SharePoint. And the way we did that was by creating this package here. So our SharePoint migration package, which you guys are the first people to see because I'm literally just unveiling it for the first time, looks like this. We will start with an introduction and visioning session. So we'll meet with some of your key people in the organization to start to talk about what SharePoint looks like, how it can work. We can do a little bit of a recap of some of the things I talked about today and make sure that everybody understands just why this is so important, why it's going to be so great, and how we're going to do it. From there, you also get a customized SharePoint landing page. This is a page that will design for your business with your pictures or calendars or contacts or folders, however you want that kind of default homepage to look. We will do your organizational architecture for both Teams and SharePoint. So we'll kind of take what you have now, all of your map drives and files and folders, and we will map that into a new organizational structure that will work for both Teams and from SharePoint. You're going to get 2 hours worth of data migration preparation. So if your file names are really, really long, or we need to archive a bunch of data because it's 100 years old, we'll give you up to 2 hours of our time just helping you prepare and clean up and restructure your data so it's going to be easier to migrate it. And of course, we can spend more, but we'll build in 2 hours right into the project. Then we will migrate the data from the old architecture into the new architecture. So we'll take care of getting all the data synced over, moved over, and working in the new system. We're going to give you a phase migration plan because that's been our kind of recipe for success is don't do all of this at once. Pick one team, one department, move just the leadership, move just finance, do it in phases and stages. And I think you'll find that you get really good adoption and really good momentum. So our kind of approach will be a phase migration plan, not a come in, just rip and replace. And we'll provide some basic training for end users about the different platforms, how to sync that directory so it shows up in a File Explorer, how to set up OneDrive on their phone, how to use SharePoint on their phone, the basics of how to access and move around and get to data. All of that we will do for $5,000 for up to 10 teams with all the included data for that team. And when we think about teams, like what is a team? Think about that as kind of your file structure now. So if you have a leadership drive and a finance drive and a marketing drive, those are probably going to be teams in your new implementation. So any group of people that is going to have files associated with just that group, that's a great way to think of what a team is. So we will do up to 10 teams and all the data that is needed for those 10 teams for just a flat fee of $5,000, including all of those bullets I just mentioned up above. Then if you need additional teams, it's just $100 a team. So we can build one for 10 of your clients. We can build one for 8 more departments in your company. Whatever you need beyond the 10 that we include are just $100 a team after that. And then of course, there's optional add-ons like more file migration prep or doing more training or other services that we can talk to you about, like some of the automation work that we're doing with clients. All right, I am going to officially stop talking and open the floor up for questions. I can see there's a bunch in the chat already, so let me get to some of those. But if there's other people who want to ask a question, feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute and ask it live. So somebody asked, let's put this up here. Are they correct to assume that SharePoint, the access to SharePoint will be utilized security and shares set up via SharePoint, or do you have to set up a separate security structure through Teams? No. So they're asking about kind of Teams and SharePoint relationship. Teams is literally just a skin for SharePoint. The data is in SharePoint, the security, the compliance, the auditing, all the work is actually in SharePoint. Teams is simply a front end to get to that data. So we don't have to set things up in both. We set it up in SharePoint and then skin it to Teams so you can access it from there. Bandwidth requirements are not that complicated. We get this question a lot of, do I need to have a ton of bandwidth to make this work? And the answer is no. And that's because you can sync the data locally. So when you're working on files, they're going to copy to your local computer. And when you're working on them on your local computer. You're not working on them over the cloud. Then when you save a file and you're done with it, it will sync that change to the cloud when it has time to, when there's bandwidth available. So this doesn't have some massive impact on your bandwidth. We have only had one organization that had to upgrade their bandwidth, and it was because they were dealing with very, very large CAD files. I would bet most people on this call would not have to make any changes to what their bandwidth looks like to move all their data to SharePoint. And if you did have to make a change, it's going to be nothing compared to the cost savings. Somebody asked about how is it to kind of manage security when you're letting people manage the security, and it can be a nightmare. You're not wrong. The good news is you get to decide who has access to do that. So in kind of the permission sets, there's two major groups, owners and members. If I'm an owner of a team, which is where data is stored, let's just use the accounting as an example. If I am the owner of the accounting team, or one of the owners, there can be multiple, I am able to do things like share files with other people, add people to the team, decide who can see the data that's in the accounting directory. If I'm a member of the accounting team, I cannot. And so most organizations, you're just going to be careful about who you decide to make an owner of something. If you limit the number of owners, you're going to limit the number of people who are making IT permissions. However, the other thing that we can do is we can audit your file permissions for you anytime. My recommendation would be at least once a year, do what's called a SharePoint file access audit. And it will show you everything that's shared beyond just the owners and members of that directory. It's a great way to once a year just do some cleanup and say, you know what, we don't need these anymore. Let's just blow them out. And that way you can kind of keep it clean. So much easier than in Windows. In Windows, people are constantly right-clicking on files, going to properties, changing security, adding people, and it's a nightmare to see any of that. In SharePoint, it's much, much easier. Can SharePoint be used for an external-facing website? It can be. There are some limitations. It's not going to be your public website. So like, don't think I'm going to go cancel my web provider and get rid of my website and replace that with SharePoint. It's not for that. But if you want a very basic site where you're going to publish like maybe some upcoming events that were coming up or some basic information, you can use SharePoint to do that. We just need to be very, very security conscious because we don't want to expose anything to the outside world that we don't intend to. So it needs to be done with a lot of caution, but it can be done. And then the licensing, I'm not going to get into only because it is so specific to each individual customer. There are a total of 97 different Office 365 SKUs. And depending on which SKU you have, it may or may not include SharePoint. But that is something I'm more than happy to talk to anybody offline about. If you want to set up a call or have an email and just say, hey, here's the licensing I have. Does that include SharePoint? We can easily take a look at that for you. And if not, we can tell you what it would cost to add SharePoint to your plan. A lot of people are saying that, okay, they see similarities between Google Drive and SharePoint. I would say that Google beat Microsoft. They beat Microsoft to the punch when it came to making online free for nonprofits. They beat them when it came to the online version of apps like Sheets and Google Drive, and they beat them to online file storage and collaboration. They even beat them to like the automation form with Google Form compared to Microsoft Forms. However, Google's innovation has not changed all that much in the past few years. Microsoft has not only caught up, but in my opinion, has gone much, much further. Their automation tools, just in particular, their auditing and compliance tools, their ability to give a lot more control to the organization. Microsoft, if you have to remember, at the end of the day, they are a company that makes productivity software for businesses. Google is a consumer data company. That fundamental philosophical foundational difference shows up everywhere. In Microsoft, I can wipe data from people's computers. In Google, that's a very complicated process. In Microsoft, I have complete access to people's mailboxes, and I can share and remove and delete. And in Google, that's a very complicated process. Google's written from the end user's perspective, and it's all about data. Microsoft is all about functionality and features. It doesn't say Google doesn't have some great products, because they do, but I would say that it is now very competitive, if not slightly biased towards Microsoft on just a fundamental feature set. But where the tipping point really comes is the interoperability and compatibility. Many of us use Microsoft already. We're either using the Microsoft Office suite or we're using Microsoft 365 for email. We're already in the Microsoft world. One of the greatest parts about continuing on that path is just how well everything works together. I'm in my email and it automatically recommends I send the file that I worked on most recently. I'm in a document and I can automatically email people and pull them in or pull them in from Teams. When you're in the Microsoft world, the deeper and more kind of holistically you use the products, the more efficiency you gain, the more benefit you gain. And so for me, that's the tipping point. even if the two products were completely on par, which they're close, but I think Microsoft's a little bit ahead, the ease of use and the kind of interoperability is what tips the scales in Microsoft's favor. Can SharePoint be used for applications that require local server installation? No. So this is not your application server. That's what's called Microsoft Azure. So Microsoft Azure does allow you to spin up things like SQL servers. And now there's even the ability to consume SQL like a service, whereas you're not just buying a server, you're just buying access to the idea of running something in SQL. So SharePoint is just files and folders, flat files and folders mostly. So think Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the documents and files and folders that we interact with all the time. It's not my database application. It's not where I'm going to store my SQL or my even my Access database. You can put Access, but it's not going to be something that's going to be accessed by a lot of people all the time. If users were terrible at getting organizing, so it's not going to make disorganization work worse because you're going to create buckets where people can put things. And fundamentally, the most important thing is we just don't lose data. And so if everything and everywhere that somebody could put something is backed up in Microsoft's cloud, at the very least, we can sleep well knowing that nobody can lose something. No laptop getting stolen means that we've lost files. Everything is up in the cloud. But it gives you a lot more opportunity to build organizational structures, whereas in the traditional legacy Windows system, it's pretty boxed in, and that can be limiting in the way that you think about it. Does Paragus folks go through Microsoft training or Edge certification? Yeah, so we now have several different employees who are certified in different aspects of Microsoft. So even just within SharePoint, they've got 9 different certification programs. And then there's teams and there's several different levels there. And then there's things like SharePoint lists and all the different automation platforms. All of our staff are certified in different aspects of the Microsoft Online 365 ecosystem. And we bring in the right experts for the right parts of your project. A lot of them live in that new automation department that we built. And a lot of those engineers are the ones that are really, really familiar and comfortable with the SharePoint Online tools and also just the rest of the 365 ecosystem. Somebody asked, can you use SharePoint to collaborate with people outside your organization who don't have SharePoint? Yes. So I'll give you a perfect example. My marketing company is forever a Mac-based company, and they're a forever Google company. I don't think that's ever going to change. So they live in Macs, they live in Google, and they loved Dropbox. We are now able to easily and effortlessly share all of our files. We even share Planner, which is like a project management tool to assign tasks and make sure things get done. And they do not have to be a Microsoft customer to be able to do that. They're what are called guests in our environment. So the tenant belongs to Paragus. We can create guest accounts that belong to people who are not Paragus employees. And then we can assign those very limited guest accounts to have access to just what we want them to have access to. And they can do all of that without having to be Microsoft customers or own SharePoint or any of those things. Can I talk a little bit more about the concept of having multiple calendars or sharing capabilities? So SharePoint's a storage location. So if I wanted to put a calendar up on SharePoint, whatever team I choose to put that calendar in will have access to that calendar. I can also use the SharePoint website tool to build kind of like an internal website. And if what I want is a calendar, I could take a Microsoft 365 calendar that I already have, or I could make a new Microsoft 365 calendar. I could put it anywhere, and I could link that calendar to that SharePoint page. Then what other activities and appointments show up on that calendar in 365 will show up on that SharePoint site. So it's a great way for, let's say you've got like meetings or agendas or things like that coming up, and you just want to have kind of general awareness of these are the major milestones or deadlines. Or maybe it's an out of office calendar for who's taking vacations when. Anything like that, you can publish that calendar to a SharePoint page, and that could be public or it could be internal to certain teams. I think that's all of the questions in the chat. Any other questions from anybody else about anything related to SharePoint? So somebody asked, what's kind of the restoration process for if data is breached or lost or corrupted? So just like if your data was on premise, you would want to back it up. You still want to back up your data in SharePoint. So just the same way we back up your email, the same service we use for 365 backups, they back up your whole tenant. So the way the backup service works is it goes in and it backs up everything in your 365 tenant to another set of servers that are not Microsoft. This is a third-party company. So then you've got kind of a nice firewall. Microsoft goes down, this other third-party company has all your data. your 365 account gets hacked, there's no way for them to get into the backup system because the different passwords, different usernames, you can't traverse from one to the other. And that's our strong recommendation. If you're going to go into the SharePoint environment, if you're already on 365, if you're using Teams, you want to back up that data because it's important data. And so the product that we use backs it all up for one cost per user per month. And then all that data is synced offsite into another set of files and folders that we can access anytime. And to get that data back is very easy. If we need to go restore something, we can just go in there and restore it. Another thing that sometimes people worry about is sometimes you're in an industry where your government requirements suggest that your data is not allowed to leave the United States. For example, if you're a manufacturer and you have ITAR compliance, you cannot have your data ever leave the continental United States. Microsoft has a specific Microsoft 365 plan where they guarantee they will only store your data on servers in the continental United States. So that's another common misconception. People say, I can't use Microsoft because I'm not allowed to have my data out there in the cloud. You can, you just have to use the right product. It's called their G Suite product, which is a little confusing. But G3, G1, G5 stands for government. That G guarantees certain localities. And so if we want just United States, just continental United States, that's an option that we can select that will guarantee the data stays local to that area based on your regulations. Any other questions I've missed that people want to know about SharePoint? All right, well, I'm just going to leave you with this slide. Again, we've put a lot of time and effort into coming up with a way to make this as easy and effortless for you as possible. Rather than some complicated project management process, we have to do a ton of scoping and discovery and spend weeks trying to get your proposal. We rolled out this flat rate program to make it as fast and easy as possible for your organization to take advantage of all these features. So if this is something you're interested in, we'd be happy to talk to you about more. If you're a current customer, reach out to your account relationship manager. If you're a prospective customer or you're not in a relationship with Paragus today, please reach out to talk and we'd be happy to talk more about this and other services that we offer. I want to thank everybody again for tuning in today. And as always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask.